Okay, I'll admit it. Life insurance doesn't usually make me want to jump up and down with excitement,
Yeah,
you know.
right.
But we're about to explore a side of it that might surprise you. It's called Indexed Universal Life Insurance,
Oh, interesting.
or IUL for short.
Okay.
So imagine this. What if your life insurance could actually grow, like your investments, but
Oh.
without that direct risk of being, completely tied to the stock market?
Yeah.
That's what IUL is all about, kind of. And for this deep dive, we've got a super helpful resource,
Okay.
an article called A Comprehensive Guide to Indexed Universal Life Insurance from Flux Magazine.
Oh, I've heard good things about that one.
Yeah, it's a great overview to start with. And the best part is we've got John White with us.
Awesome.
He's the president of Financial Guidepost. Thanks so much for joining us today.
It's great to be here. IUL can seem a little complicated at first, but it's an incredibly interesting part of financial planning.
For sure, it is.
Yeah.
So before we really get into the nitty-gritty, maybe you could give us like a quick elevator pitch
Sure, happy to.
on what exactly IUL is and how it's different from, say, traditional whole life insurance.
Okay, so IUL is a type of permanent life insurance, just like whole life. So that means it gives your beneficiaries a death benefit and builds cash value over time.
Okay.
But here's where IUL kind of veers off. Its cash value is actually linked to how a specific market index performs.
Oh, okay.
Like the S&P 500, for example.
So that's where the whole index part comes in.
Yeah.
But wait, does that mean you're like directly investing in the stock market with IUL?
It's not quite that straightforward. Your money isn't literally buying stocks.
Right.
Think of it more like taking advantage of how those indexes perform. So the insurance company will use some of your premiums to buy options contracts that follow the index. So your cash value could grow when the market's doing well,
Right.
but you're not directly exposed to the risk of losing money if the stock market drops.
Gotcha. That's a key difference, right?
Yes.
It's not about owning stock. It's about like tapping into that growth potential, but with a safety net.
Yeah.
Now, I know there are these things called caps and floors. Can you break those down for us a little?
Sure thing. Think of caps and floors like built-in safety measures.
Yeah.
A cap limits how much your cash value can go up,
Okay.
even if the market is doing super well,
Gotcha.
On the other hand, a floor guarantees you a minimum return. So your cash value won't decrease even if the market takes a dip.
So it's kind of like a buffer against those market swings, right?
Sure.
Striking that balance between like potential for growth, but also some protection.
Exactly.
Now might be a good time to remind our listeners that if this whole IUL thing is sparking their curiosity and they want to learn more, John White at Financial Guidepost is the person to talk to.
I appreciate that.
He's helped so many people navigate IUL and make good decisions.
Yeah, IUL is super flexible, but it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing, right?
Right.
So it's really important to figure out your own needs and goals first.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little and talk about the good stuff. What are some of the big advantages of IUL that attract people to it?
Well, one of the most appealing things is the possibility of getting higher returns compared to, your traditional whole life insurance. If the market's doing well, your cash value has the chance to grow faster.
Makes sense.
But of course, past performance doesn't guarantee anything for the future.
Right.
And it's essential to talk to a qualified financial advisor about your individual situation and how much risk you're comfortable with.
Yeah, and I think that's where someone like you comes in. You can really help people figure out if IUL fits their goals and their risk tolerance.
Absolutely. Finding that right fit is key. Another great thing about IUL is the flexibility. You have options when it comes to paying premiums, and you can even adjust your death benefit over time as your needs change.
So it's not like a rigid contract you're locked into.
Not at all. It adapts, It can change along with your financial life, which is a big plus for a lot of people. Yeah.
And then there's the tax advantages. The cash value in an IUL policy grows tax deferred, and you can access that money through loans without getting hit with immediate taxes.
That's a pretty big perk. It sounds like there's a lot to like about IUL, but I know there are always two sides to every story. What are some of the potential downsides or things people should think about before they jump into IUL?
Yeah, that's a great point. Transparency is super important.
Yep.
One thing to consider is the cost. IUL can be pricier than other types of life insurance, especially early on.
Okay.
The fees for managing the policy and those options contracts can add up.
So not necessarily the most budget-friendly option if you're mainly looking for, basic coverage.
Right. You got to weigh those potential benefits against the costs and see if it makes sense for your overall financial plan. Another thing to keep in mind is that while those caps protect you if the market tanks,
Hmm.
they can also limit how much you gain if the market goes through the roof.
Ah, so you're basically trading off some potential upside for that downside protection. Exactly. It's a trade-off to consider. And it's also important to remember that IUL isn't some get-rich-quick scheme. It's a long-term
Right.
strategy. You got to be patient and understand how it works.
Right.
This is why having someone like John White can be incredibly valuable.
Sure.
He can really help you analyze those different scenarios and figure out which type of insurance works best for your risk tolerance and your financial goals.
And just a reminder for our listeners, John White is the president of Financial Guideposts,
Hmm.
and he's an expert when it comes to IUL.
Oh, definitely.
If you want to dive into your own situation, get some personalized advice, reaching out to John is a great next step.
I agree. He's a fantastic resource.
So, John, we've been focusing a lot on the growth potential with IUL,
Hmm.
but how do you actually get to that money if you need it?
Well, that's one of the best things about IOL. It's really flexible. You actually have a couple of choices. You can take loans against your cash value, or you can just withdraw money.
Okay. So what are the pros and cons of each option?
Well, taking loans is usually better for taxes. You can borrow from your policy's cash value without any immediate tax consequences.
So it's kind of like having a line of credit that you can use without triggering a taxable event.
Exactly. It's a special advantage that IUL offers. Now, when you make withdrawals, you're taking money directly out of your cash value, and those are usually taxable.
Gotcha. So loans are generally the way to go if you need access to funds from your IUL policy. But of course, it's always best to check with a financial expert like John White
All right.
to make sure you're making the smartest move.
I definitely agree. Each situation is different, and there are lots of little things to consider.
Okay, so we've talked about how IUL works, the pros and cons, and how it stacks up against other kinds of insurance. But John, I'm curious from your experience, who would you say IUL is really a good fit for?
That's a great question. I've worked with so many people, and I've found that IUL tends to work well for people who are comfortable with some level of risk, who are looking for that long-term growth potential, and who want those tax advantages. But of course, every situation is different, and that's why I always emphasize how important personalized financial guidance is.
Right, it's not about forcing something that doesn't fit. It's about finding solutions that align with each person's needs and goals.
Exactly.
And that's where John White and his team at Financial Guidepost really shine. They take the time to understand your unique circumstances and help you make informed choices.
I appreciate that. It's all about empowering people to take control of their financial futures.
Yeah.
And, something we haven't really touched on yet is the psychological aspect of IUL.
Oh, that's interesting. What do you mean by that?
Well, I've noticed that IUL can give people a sense of control and flexibility that you don't always get with other financial products.
Okay.
Like, you have the power to adjust your premium payment and even your death benefit over time as your needs change.
So it's not just a static contract that you're stuck with.
Not at all. IUL can adapt to your changing financial situation, which can be incredibly empowering.
Yeah, I can see how that would appeal to a lot of people.
Absolutely. It's all about having choices and feeling like you're in charge of your financial future.
Right. It's about having a plan that can grow and evolve with you, not one that feels restrictive.
Exactly. And another thing I've seen is that IUL can be a great way to get families talking about finances.
Oh,
It
interesting.
gets people thinking about their long-term goals and how they want to protect their loved ones.
That's such an important point. It's not just about numbers on a page. It's about the peace of mind that comes with knowing you have a plan in place.
Absolutely. And that's why I always tell people to have those conversations early and to seek guidance from someone they trust, like John White.
So, John, we've covered a ton of information today, and I think our listeners have a much better grasp on what IUL is and how it all works. But before we wrap up, I want to address something that's probably on a lot of people's minds.
Hmm.
Is IUL something everyone should consider?
That's a great question. And the answer, like most things in finance, is it depends.
Mm-hmm.
IUL is a powerful tool, but it's not a magic solution, right?
Right. It's not a one-size-fits-all.
Exactly. It's about finding the right tools for your own unique situation. And that's where someone like John White at Financial Guideposts comes in.
For sure.
He's amazing at assessing your needs, explaining all the ins and outs of IUL, and helping you decide if it's the right fit for your overall strategy.
Absolutely. And if you're interested in the possibilities of IUL, I definitely recommend reaching out to John. He's the expert you want by your side to guide you through the process and make sure you're making smart decisions.
Couldn't agree more. He's incredibly knowledgeable and a true advocate for his clients.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into index universal life insurance, I think we've uncovered a lot of fascinating insights, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. IUL is a complex tool with many facets, and I hope our conversation has shed some light on its potential benefits and things to consider.
It definitely has. For our listeners who are thinking, okay, this sounds interesting, but where do I go from here?
Mm.
What would your advice be?
My advice is simple. Get in touch with a trusted financial professional who specializes in IUL. Having someone who can guide you through all the details, answer your questions, and help you make informed decisions based on your specific needs is crucial.
And I think we both know an expert who perfectly fits that description.
Absolutely. John White at Financial Guidepost is the go-to guy for everything IUL. He's got this remarkable ability to break down complex concepts into easy-to-understand terms, and he can create personalized strategies that align with your goals.
I couldn't agree more. John, you've given us so much valuable information today. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we sign off?
Just one last thought. Don't let the complexity of IUL scare you away from exploring its potential. With the right guidance, IUL can be a powerful tool for building wealth, protecting your family, and creating a brighter financial future.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with this final thought-provoking question. Given the potential of IUL, is it time for you to reevaluate your current life insurance strategy? Remember, John White at Financial Guidepost is just a phone call away.
He is.
He's the key to unlocking the power of IUL and making your financial dreams a reality. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Well, term life insurance is kind of like renting an apartment, you know?
Okay.
It gives you coverage for a specific period, usually like 10 or 20 years,
Right.
but you don't build up any cash value. It's a good choice if you need affordable coverage for a while, like when you have a mortgage or young kids to protect.
So it's more about just that protection, whereas IUL is more about combining that protection with the potential for growth.
Yeah. Exactly. It's like owning a home versus renting. You're building equity over time with IUL. Now, if you compare IUL to whole life insurance, the big difference is how the cash value grows. Whole life guarantees you a fixed rate of return, which is nice and stable, but those rates are usually lower than what you might earn with IUL.
So with whole life, you get that guaranteed growth, but it might not keep up with inflation or how the market's doing.
Right.
Whereas IUL offers the chance for higher returns, but it's tied to market performance.
That's a great way to put it. And this is where having an expert like John White on your side can be super valuable. He can walk you through those different scenarios and help you figure out which type of insurance really aligns with how much risk you're comfortable with and your financial goals.
This is probably a good time to remind everyone that John White is the president of Financial Guideposts. And he truly knows his stuff when it comes to IUL. So if anyone's thinking about diving deeper into their own situation, getting that personalized advice, John is the person to reach out to.
I agree. He's a fantastic resource.
So, John, we've talked a lot about how IUL can potentially grow your money.
Yeah.
But how do you actually access those funds if you need to use them?
That's one of the things I love about IUL. It's super flexible.
Okay.
You have a couple options. You can either take loans against your cash value, or you can make withdrawals.
So what are the, pros and cons of each method?
Well, loans are usually the more tax-friendly way to go.
Okay.
You borrow from your policy's cash value, but you don't have any immediate tax implications.
So it's like having a line of credit that you can tap into without having to worry about taxes right away.
Exactly. It's a unique advantage that IUL has. Now, when you withdraw money, you're taking it directly out of your cash value, and those withdrawals are usually taxable.
Got it. So loans are generally the better option if you need to use some of the funds from your IUL policy, but of course, it's always smart to talk to a financial expert like John White.
For sure.
To make sure you're making the best decision.
Absolutely. Each situation is different, and there are many nuances to consider.
Okay, so we've covered how IUL works, the good and the bad, and how it compares to other types of insurance. But John, I'm curious, from what you've seen, who do you think IUL is a really good fit for? Who benefits the most from this type of insurance?
That's a great question. You know, after working with so many people over the years, I'd say IUL tends to be a good option for those who are okay with some level of risk,
Okay.
who are looking for that long-term growth, and who want those tax advantages.
Right.
But of course, there are always exceptions. That's why I always stress the importance of personalized financial guidance.
Yeah, it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. It's about finding those financial solutions that really match each person's needs and goals.
Exactly.
And that's where John White and his team at Financial Guideposts truly excel. They really take the time to understand your individual situation and help you make well-informed decisions.
I appreciate that. It's all about empowering people to take control of their financial future. And, something we haven't really touched on yet is the psychological aspect of IUL.
Oh, interesting. What do you mean by that?
Well, I found that IUL can actually give people a sense of control and flexibility,
Okay.
a feeling you don't always get with other financial products. For example, you have the ability to adjust those premium payments
hmm
and even your death benefit as your needs change over time.
So it's not like this static, unchangeable contract.
Not at all. IUL can adapt to your evolving financial situation, which I think can be really empowering.
I could see how that would be really appealing.
Absolutely. It's all about having options and feeling like you're the one making the decisions about your financial future.
Right. It's about having a plan that grows with you, not one that feels limiting.
Exactly. And another thing I've noticed is that IUL can be a great way to start those financial conversations with your family.
Mm,
It encourages people to really think about their long-term financial goals and how they want to protect their loved ones.
that's a crucial point. It's not just about the numbers. It's about that peace of mind, knowing you have a plan in place.
Absolutely. And that's why I always encourage people to start those conversations early on and get guidance from a trusted advisor like John White.
So, John, we've covered a lot of ground today, and I think our listeners have a much better understanding of what IUL is and how it works.
Huh.
But before we wrap things up, I want to touch on a question that I'm sure is on many people's minds. Is IUL something everyone should consider? Like, is this right for everybody?
That's a great question. And honestly, the answer, like with most things in finance, is it
Yeah,
depends.
right.
IUL is a powerful tool, but it's not a magic cure-all,
But it's
right?
not one size fits all.
Exactly. It's about finding the right tools for your own unique toolbox. And that's where someone like John White at Financial Guidepost is invaluable. He's great at assessing your needs, explaining IUL in detail, and helping you decide if it fits into your overall strategy.
Absolutely. And if you're intrigued by IUL and its possibilities, I highly recommend reaching out to John. He's the expert you want in your corner
Definitely
to
right.
guide you through the process and help you make informed choices.
I couldn't agree more. He's a wealth of knowledge and a true advocate for his clients.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into indexed universal life insurance, I think it's safe to say we've uncovered some really interesting stuff.
IUL is definitely a tool with a lot of layers to it.
Yeah,
And I hope our conversation has helped make sense of its potential benefits and what to keep in mind.
it definitely has. For our listeners who are thinking, okay, this sounds pretty cool, but where do I even start? What advice would you give them?
My advice is pretty simple, actually. Reach out to a financial pro who really knows IUL. It's so important to have someone who can walk you through the details, answer your questions, and help you make decisions that are right for you.
And I think we both know an expert who fits that description perfectly.
Absolutely. John White at Financial Guideposts is the person to call for all things IUL. He has a knack for explaining complex stuff in a way that makes sense, and he's great at creating personalized strategies that match your goals.
Couldn't agree more. John, you've shared so much valuable information with us today. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap things up?
Just one final thought. Don't let the fact that IUL can seem complicated scare you away from looking into it.
Right.
With the right guidance, IUL can be a powerful tool for building wealth, protecting your family, and creating a more secure financial future.
I love that. And on that note, we'll leave you with this final thought-provoking question. Given the potential of IUL, is it time for you to take another look at your current life insurance strategy?
It's a good question.
Remember, John White at Financial Guidepost is just a phone call away. He's the key to unlocking the power of IUL and making those financial dreams a reality. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.